Hello and welcome to the UK SEDS Student Space Symposium 2021 Abstract Writing webinar. Thank you very much for tuning in and coming here to learn a bit more about the Student Space Symposium, how you can get involved, and how to write a great abstract. So first things first, what is the Student Space Symposium? The Student Space Symposium is run by UK SEDS as a one-day virtual event in which students from across the country present their space-related research in a variety of space-related topics, with this year networking opportunities and a careers fair to talk to employers and other young students and professionals. And if you are selected for the Student Space Symposium and present your research at the event, there's also a chance for you to be published in the special UK SEDS edition of the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, the JBIS. So why and how should you get involved? So like I said previously, there's a chance to write and present a space-related research paper, which is fantastic experience, and a potential to be published in the JBIS, which is a peer-reviewed journal. In order to get involved, all you have to do is to submit a 200 to 250 word abstract on any space-related topic, either research you may be doing as part of your degree or research that you are doing independently. If your abstract is selected, you will then be notified and be given a month and a half to develop this into a full paper and then present it at the webinar, at the symposium in October. Here is the timeline for abstract submission and for the symposium itself. So on the 21st of July at midnight, the call for abstract closes, so you have until then to write and submit one. Within 2 weeks, you'll be notified whether or not you've been accepted or rejected. And then by the 24th of September at midnight, you have until then to submit your fully written paper. A week later, at midnight on October the 1st, you must submit your presentation slides, and then on the 9th of October we'll be having the symposium itself. Most important thing to note there, of course, is if you wish to enter, you have until the 21st of July to write your abstract, which is what we're going to be informing you on how to do during this webinar. So, let's get on to that. How do you write a good abstract? And for this, we will be going to Satch from UK SEDS to give us a good overview of that. Satch?
Hello. Hi, Josh. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just start sharing my screen then now. Sorry, I've obviously not set up the permissions, which is great. Okay, so hopefully, okay. I'm really sorry, I need to set up the permissions to do it.
That's all right. Any luck?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I was worried I might have to restart it, but I don't have to. So yeah, just starting of this talk, the perils of not checking your permissions. So that's lesson number one. I'm going to full screen now. Can you see that?
Yep, we've got that there.
Okay, great. So sorry about the delay, everyone. As Josh said, my name is Satch, and I'm part of the events and competitions team at UK SEDS. I'm also a PhD student at the UCL Millard Space Science Laboratory. Today's talk or presentation is going to be how to write an abstract. It's going to be a very, very quick overview. And it is, of course, tailored to the abstract that some of you that will be tuning in will want to submit as part of the symposium. But also, I think some of the things that I'll talk about can apply to other abstract writing. It could be for funding. It could be as part of one of your assignments. So I'm hoping that some of the things I share today will be transferable. results that were. One thing that I think that's great that Will's done here on his abstract, he's also included a rationale. So I think, although lots of research is very important, some can be, I think it's quite good to tell the reader why the research is important, perhaps where the gaps are in the body of knowledge. And he's done this in a separate paragraph, which I think reads really well. So you get an idea of, okay, we know what the subject matter is, and now we know why it's important. The third point is the method. So looking at how are we going to fulfill this, perhaps you've also thinking about including some objectives and how you might fulfill those. And the final and possibly most important, depending on the type of study you're doing and where you are timeline-wise, is the results. And you can see that the language that Will's used here is, this report will use the design, this report will do this. So it's a little bit more future tense, but it's describing and letting the reader know what's going to happen. Now, as I mentioned, there's no sort of one solution fits all. You can do slightly different variations. So I just wanted to show that. This isn't with an example, but really just to hammer home the key categories. So introduction, introduce the subject matter to the reader, let them know what the background is. What do I need to know to be able to understand your results, your analysis? The methodology, so how are we going to do this? So for some of you, that might be a qualitative study. You might be doing interviews or questionnaires. So you might want to talk about that very briefly there. Some of you will be doing quantitative stuff, data analysis, and even a mix of the two. So if you've done, for example, a number of interviews and you might want to start looking at statistical significance and so on and so forth. So a brief introduction on what that method is. Key results, again, we've already seen that with what Will has put, but the asterisk is to sort of say, well, firstly, you might be in a situation where you have lots of results, which is great. That's really, really good. But for the abstract, I would say try and focus on the most important results. And this can actually be quite tricky, I think, once you're doing the research, and obviously it's your baby, so to speak, you feel like all of the research results are important. And so you might want to just consult with one of your peers or superiors or supervisors about what they think is the most important takeaway. The asterisk is also here just to say that some of you, and indeed what Josh has already said, is that, we're asking you to submit an abstract before you may have done the research. So in this case, you may use the language of things like, well, I will do this. The research might, reveal this. We're hoping to show this. Now, the final thing that I would recommend, and this is, again, there's not a lot of exceptions and rules here. This is something that I like, as both mainly as a reader, is a single sentence or so about future work. I think it really helps the reader, understand what the significance is and where you're going next. I wouldn't always assume that an expert would read the paper and think, okay, they've done this, this, and this, they've shown this, and therefore logically they're going here with that. So I personally think it's quite a nice touch just to sort of signpost a little bit where the research might go next. Okay, so that's what goes into the abstract. I've tried to be, as vague as possible there, really, because it really depends on the research. But similarly, I think it's also important to talk about what doesn't go in the abstract. Citations, again, I've got another rule and another exception here. So generally speaking, citations are not expected in an abstract. That is particularly true of an abstract that prefaces an actual paper. I think the reason probably for this is simply that, well, you're about to talk about it. So we don't need proof of where you've captured this from because we'll find out soon. Last year, we did see some abstracts. We saw some great abstracts with citations, and that was perfectly fine too. If you feel more comfortable just sort of supporting what you're saying, that's fine. But generally, I would say, they're not required. And if you don't include them, it won't detract from our assessment of your submission. Undefined acronyms or abbreviations. This is a really important one. And I think when you're writing, particularly if you're quite far into the research and you're wrangling with the paper and the sectioning, you sometimes kind of trip up and you forget, where did I define that, or have I mentioned that? And so really the golden rule for the abstract is just define the acronyms and abbreviations. I'm just going to go back here just to show how Will has done this really well. You can see that, on-orbit servicing, MEV, although you will have to reintroduce these in the body of text, it's really important you do it in the abstract. And once again, I have another star, because there are some really obvious ones. If you're, for example, thinking like NASA or ESA, probably don't need to define those. But most of the time, I would err on the side of caution and recommend that you do. Okay, so for number 3, this may sound blatantly obvious, but I have fallen into this pitfall, whereby you've kind of done the paper, you've come back to the abstract maybe a bit later, or maybe you've written the abstract up front, like we're asking you to do now, and then you come back to it and you think, oh, that didn't work out, so I didn't do that. Where possible, really make sure that what you're doing in the abstract is going to be in the paper. Now, I know that some of you will be thinking, oh, I haven't got the results yet. That's fine. This is more of a note for the abstract that will preface the actual paper itself. So if you're selected, then we would like to, just ensure that what we see in the abstract is actually there in the paper. And this is to say that it's often not intentional. It's just simply a product of the way that, you sometimes work in different work streams. And lastly, and as Josh has already said, no more than 250 words, please. This is a limit that we've set. I'm sure all of you are familiar with word constraints or page constraints or line constraints. So please try and keep everything under 250 words. Again, if you're struggling and you're thinking it's over, you can speak to other people who may be familiar with the research. Can you crop that method? Can you shrink down the introduction? Okay, so final thoughts, really. First thing, things will change, and hopefully not too much. So the research that you do, if you're still doing it, or perhaps you're about to start doing it, there are obviously uncertainties, and you may, with the best of intentions, expect a certain result to end one way. For example, let's say you're doing some interviews, and you find out that your participants completely go against the literature. You were expecting them all to say this or to think this, and they haven't, and that's perfectly fine too. We expect that there will be some changes, and so the initial abstract you submit might vary a little bit from your paper, and that's fine, and that's good. That's showing that you're following good research practices. You're being transparent. You're being rigorous. However, if you submit an abstract, let's say related to entry, descent, landing technologies for Mars, and then the paper you submit is related to, I don't know, needing to improve space litigation, that could be a bit of a problem. So, if you've got a massive problem and you need to change, then obviously speak to us, but generally try and make sure that the actual topic stays the same. Statements, not explanations. Again, this was already, I kind of inferred this in the beginning, but you can see in the abstract we're not, there's no real sort of depth of analysis. You're not bringing in perhaps some of your personality in the language. You're kind of, it's boom, boom, boom. The study will do this. The research method, we use this. We saw this. That was 80%. This was 90%. It's just stating what happened. There'll be time to explain and analyze and critique in the body of the text. How to write an abstract? I mean, I don't think I can say it better than many of the wonderful resources that are available online. I shall refrain from naming a specific search engine, but you can use any search engine to putting this in, and you will find lots of resources. For those of you who really want to, do a very good one, there are books, I'm sure, on academic writing style and prose and everything like that. So you can find lots of great resources out there. The other resource, of course, is us. We are here. We are available to help. If you have any doubts with the abstract writing or with the application in general, do let us know, and we'd always be happy to help. And all that's left for me to say really is thank you for listening, and we really look forward to receiving your submissions. As Josh has already said, this is a great opportunity for you to showcase your work. Some of you will be undergrads, master's students, maybe even doctorate students, or in industry. And there's so much great work that goes on with students, and this is your opportunity to showcase that. So if you've got something that's going on and you think it's really interesting and you want to share it, then please, we really encourage you to apply, and we look forward to seeing your stuff. Okay, thank you. I'll go back to you now, Josh.
Thank you so much. Satch, for that absolutely fantastic bit of advice on how to write a great webinar for the Student Space Symposium. We're now going to go to a question and answer session with some participants from last year's Student Space Symposium, Ben, Olga and Rebecca. Feel free to submit your questions via the chat if you have any specific queries, and we'll see if we can get an answer for you. Hi there, guys. Thank you for coming. It's great to have you here. Our first question is, did you write your abstract from scratch, or was it based on work you were already doing? Let's go with Ben to start. Yes.
So for me, I did mine on terraforming Mars. I was already somewhat interested in the subject beforehand, so I'd done some, I guess, reading around the subjects in my own time. So I sort of knew roughly the sort of direction of my paper and what it was going to cover. So I had some kind of information to start off with about sort of what was going to be in the paper and what I should really be putting in the abstract. So I guess I had a bit of an advantage there, yeah.
Olga?
In my case, to be honest, I started it on quarantine. Like, I hadn't done any research before that, and I had the idea and the hypothesis that living on a less gravitational planet would allow us to live longer. And I just explored the topic, as Ben said, during quarantine, and then is when I saw the abstract, like the possibility of participating on the symposium, and I just started my research then.
Rebecca?
In my case, the abstract described the mission we try to achieve in our satellite development group, Asteria. So the idea, the project, and the basis was formed quite a long period before submitting the abstract.
Fantastic answers. Thank you very much. I'm sure they'll be very helpful to everyone watching. Our next question is, how has participating in the symposium benefited you? Let's start with Olga this time.
It was quite exciting because I have never gotten the chance of doing my own research. It also allowed me to network in my own, apart from talking to other speakers that day, as well as the organizers from the society. I also talked to the supervisor of my own research project, which was one member of staff from the university where I studied, the University of Glasgow. So that allowed me to meet cool people that studies astronomy, and I think that would be really good for me in the near future. And yeah, I really like the possibility of doing my own research, and yeah, I learned a lot from that.
That's fantastic. Rebecca, how about you?
So I can say from my experience that when I arrived from the first time at the university in my first year, I was quite nervous to face these kind of new type of writing, so the academic writing. And through the competition in the abstracts for the UKSAT symposium, I gathered a bit of experience in this domain, which basically helped me for future stages in my career, and even now as I have an internship in this domain. Academic writing, I feel that it should be a must for all the students, so it's something that should be taught and known. It's quite difficult to put all your research into some words, and I understand this, but these exercises help you to know what's important in your research, and somehow help you to explain to people who are not in your domain about the extraordinary things you are doing.
That's wonderful. And Ben?
So yeah, quite similar to Rebecca, really. I think scientific writing or improving my scientific writing skills are probably one of the major benefits of doing the symposium. So writing the abstract is obviously quite difficult, and also writing a paper on a research topic that's sort of geared to the right audience as well. I found developing those skills even helped me in my third year writing my thesis for my degree, and also just doing an independent research project and sort of just gaining organisational skills from that I thought was really helpful.
Brilliant. Our next question is, what is your number one piece of advice for abstract writing? Rebecca?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. In general, when I try to write even for the university coursework, I try to focus on some very important cases. At least I think these are the most important ones. So basically, I try in the abstract, I try to respond to the questions: what is my topic? What's my key research question? What did I do? What did I find? And what does this mean? And I think that can be the key for a good abstract. It also depends on the reader, its experience with abstracts and in general scientific writing. But these are the questions on which I focus in general when I start to write the abstract.
Definitely some good advice. Ben?
My biggest bit of advice would probably be try and include, I guess, as much scientific detail as you reasonably can. So obviously that's quite difficult with the way it's set up when you're writing the abstract before you've actually written the paper. But I think you're really trying to do two things, which is make the abstract sound scientific, and you're also basically trying to sell your papers because you want to get picked for the symposium. And I think the best way to do that is just include as much detail and make it sound as interesting as you can. So I think, yeah, doing sort of research, a lot of research as you're writing abstracts, obviously is a bit of a trade-off there. You don't want to invest too much time and not know whether you'll actually be picked for the symposium. But yeah, you want enough research done that you can make it sound interesting, I guess, yeah.
Definitely. Olga?
Yeah, I would just say, like, picking what Rebecca and Ben just said, apart from following all the advice that the people have been given on today's webinar, I would say to make it interesting and appealing for someone that it's reading, because you want to attract people's attention and make sure that they think that what you have researched it's important. Like, let them know that what you have done is important and interesting and worth reading. So yeah.
So there's a question here which is probably more directed at me, which is, so what about an ongoing thesis, for example, from a 12-month MSc course, where the abstract must be written without the final results available? So as Sachin said during his section on how to write a good abstract, it's apparent sometimes that maybe you don't have your final results yet, and therefore you should structure and write your abstract around the idea that, you know, some potential avenues may be explored and results could go a certain way. And of course, if you're doing this as part of a university project, then make sure you've checked with a university that publishing or writing a paper on something before you have the final results is okay with them. So yeah. And our last question is again directed at our three wonderful participants from last year, is what would you say to yourself if you were about to do it again for the first time? Let us start with Ben.
Got a great question. I was thinking about that one. Yeah, I'd probably go back to the research point and maybe try and be a little bit more specific in the abstract. Yeah, it's quite difficult to do that, I guess, because we've written the abstract before the paper. I think, as you said before, you can sort of tweak it as long as it's the same subject area. But yeah, I think just including detail from research in the abstract, like if you can final results, maybe just keep it a bit vague. But yeah, try and include even some sort of conclusion in there too. Yeah.
Olga?
Yeah, in my case, I think that the main limitation of the paper that I wrote was that it was too much, like it was based on too much theory and not results. I tried to set some kind of optimization problem, but I think that I could have done that earlier. And if I have gotten some results, then that paper would have been really surprising. Because if you read it now, it seems just like a literature review, like really interesting, really literature review, but without any evidence. And I think that in science, if you don't have any evidence, then you don't have nothing. So yeah, I think that if people is considering to write the abstract, then make sure that there is something where you can find like a result on and not just theory.
And Rebecca?
So, yes, as Ben said, it's a very interesting question. And writing abstracts, I feel like it's a bit tricky because you see that it's a very small number of words, and you're thinking, well, maybe I will have time to write it all in the last day before the deadline. Well, from my experience, I can say that um, it will not be as good as an abstract which is worked, and you really try to focus your ideas. Being in a rush is never an option, and especially for abstracts, which should be very focused on the idea and should include more in little, so in the small number of words.
Some fantastic advice. And yes, as I mentioned, that was our last question. So we're done with those questions. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question, and I hope that those are some fantastic answers. And thank you again to you three for lending your experience in last year's Student Space Symposium to all those considering applying for this year. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in and listening to the webinar. And as Sachin said, if you have any further questions about the symposium or about abstract writing, feel free to get in touch with UK SEDS. Thank you very much, and we will